Hi, I'm Casey, but most of you know me around the internet as Cartoon12 or Toongal12 here on YouTube, and as my username suggests, I love cartoons. But just because I prefer animation, that doesn't mean I don't like live-action movies and TV shows either, and I also like listening to people's opinions of their favorite episodes. So I thought, why not make a few top 10 lists of my own? I'd be interested to see if anyone agrees or disagrees with my choices and see if people can point out some things that I might not have considered before. So for this top 10 list, I thought I'd feature one of my favorite live-action shows, Doctor Who. Clocking in at being on the air for over 50 years, this brilliant British sci-fi series depicts the adventures of the Doctor, a human-looking alien who explores the universe and travels through time and space via his TARDIS, a sentient spaceship disguised as a blue police box. With the help of his human companions, he uses all his wit and skill to defeat a wide array of evil foes and save the world, no matter what world he's on. Even though I was first introduced to this amazing series via the 2005 relaunch, I did make the effort to go back and watch the classic Doctors as well. It took 8 months and a lot of hunting around the internet, but eventually I managed to watch all 50 years worth of the show. Every available episode, serial, movie, and special. Needless to say, it was a wild ride from start to finish, and it's high time I discuss some of my favorite stories. Now, since we're dealing with a long series consisting of over 826 episodes, you can only imagine how daunting it can be to narrow that list down to 10. So unlike my typical top 10 list, this one's going to have to be a tad different. A wide range of actors have all played the Doctor over the years, and each one brings his unique flair and charm to the same character. So to make things a bit more interesting, I'm instead going to pick my favorite episode from each Doctor. And to keep things fair, here's a few ground rules. Number 1, to keep the list to 10, Doctors 8 and 12 are not being included. 8 unfortunately only got a movie, and 12's run isn't over yet. So unless you've got your own TARDIS, you can't exactly judge episodes that haven't aired yet. A discussion about the TV movie and the current run will be discussed in a future video. Number 2, special episodes where different incarnations of the Doctor met one another are also not being included. Those episodes will also be discussed in their own separate video. And 3, unfortunately, many episodes of the show, mostly in 1 and 2's era, have been completely lost to the sands of time due to the BBC chunking or taping over them. So bear in mind that this list is consisting of all the available episodes. I can't judge what I can't see, so basically if you're expecting the Ice Warriors or Power of the Daleks on here, look elsewhere. So with all that settled, let's get to the countdown, or count up in this case. Here it is, my top 10 favorite episodes of Doctor Who. Going all the way back to the time of the show's creation, you really have to give it to William Hartnell for giving life to such an iconic character and setting the bar for all future incarnations to come. Though he was initially more on the cranky and stubborn side, he slowly but surely mellowed out into the wise old grandpa of the group who cared deeply for his friends who became like family to him and didn't let a little thing like age get in the way of saving the world. It was tricky picking a favorite considering a lot of his episodes are missing, and like I said, I can only judge by what's available. If your tastes lean more towards straightforward action and suspense, then check out the Daleks' first appearance in the second serial or the iconic Dalek invasion of Earth. But me personally, oddly enough, the honor of favorite first Doctor story has to go to the Web Planet. When the TARDIS is mysteriously drawn to a planet he doesn't initially recognize, the Doctor and his companions Ian, Barbara, and Vicky find themselves in the middle of a war between two insectoid races. As the story unfolds, we discover the human-sized ants known as the Zarbi and their mortal enemies, the butterfly bee-like Menoptera. The two races are at war for control of the planet, which we later learn is called Vortis. Pretty soon, the TARDIS team falls into the hands of the Animus, a spider-like creature that controls the Zarbi and has them do its bidding. The Doctor must then find out who rightfully deserves to call Vortis home, determine what the Animus is really up to, and figure out a way for he and his companions to escape the planet alive. Now, fans seem to be fairly split on this story. You either like it for its great story and imagination, or you hate it for its hokey costumes and cheesy special effects. Obviously, you know which camp I fell into. To judge a story made 50 years ago using today's standards is absolutely unfair. Of course, it's not going to look as great compared to now, but you have to appreciate all the time and effort that was put into this production. At the time, these effects and makeup were outstanding, and to be fair, I think it still is. You just have to use your imagination a bit more, that's all. And that's the key word here, imagination. These are some of the most interestingly designed and well thought out alien species I've come across, with the actors giving the characters truly alien mannerisms, thought patterns, and cultural traits with weird turns of phrase, moth-like body language, and a religion of light worship and cocoon-like designs for their temples. More than that, though, it's the story that keeps you guessing, with dozens of twists and turns and surprising reveals of who the true villains are. And most, if not all, of the suspense lies in the Doctor's battle of wits with the Animus. Just how long can the Doctor con the villain into keeping him and his companions alive while not giving away the Menoptera attack plan? In a day and age where shows try to keep the action rolling quickly, it's nice to appreciate a story that takes its time to develop the world and its characters, making you care about them more when bad things start to go down. So bottom line, this to me is an underappreciated gem that deserves a lot more attention. If you can just suspend your disbelief a bit, you won't be disappointed. Following up William Hartnell, we next come to Patrick Troughton, the man who turned the badass grandpa into the lovable uncle. The second Doctor enjoyed annoying everyone he met, made an art form out of stealthily insulting his foes, liked to play the recorder, and carried a massive amount of useful things in his coat pockets, including the now famous sonic screwdriver. He's arguably had the most lasting influence on later Doctors, largely because he was just plain fun. And it's a crying shame considering that he's the Doctor of which most of his episodes are destroyed or missing. So, in a sad kind of twist, it made it easy for me to pick my favorite story from his run, and that easily goes to Tomb of the Cybermen. Aided by his companions Jamie and Victoria, the Doctor lands the TARDIS on Telos, the last resting place of the infamous Cybermen. There he discovers a band of archaeologists on a secret expedition to unearth the reason for his old enemy's extinction. In the underground depths, they find the icy tomb, a whole army in hibernation, a threat to no one, that is, until the science team intends to open the Cybermen's resting places. Well, we all know that won't end well. Pretty soon, as traitors are revealed and the dead come back to life, it's up to the TARDIS team to send the Cybermen back to the grave and save the world. This is another great example of a story that can be light on the action, but makes up for it with its suspenseful story and great character moments. One of the best ones comes when the Doctor has a pretty heartfelt conversation with Victoria about the loss of family members and how they're never really gone as long as they're remembered. And Jamie's continued banter with the Doctor officially sealed him as one of my favorite companions, being super curious about the world around him but never afraid to deliver a smackdown. And the tomb itself has a great design with a good creepy atmosphere and lots of weird gadgets. Cybermen technology is based on symbolic logic, so our heroes have to solve plenty of puzzles to get things to work. It makes for an exciting adventure that predates Indiana Jones by decades, and as things progress, it's clear the heads of the expedition have an ulterior motive in searching for the Cybermen, who, I might add, are my favorite Doctor Who villains, and in my opinion, it's in this serial that they're at their creepiest. So if adventures that involve unearthing King Tut's tomb and fighting the undead are your cup of tea, then this serial's right up your alley. But if you're looking for a story with an even bigger mystery, join me with the next Doctor. Moving into the land of color, we now come to Jon Pertwee, the secret agent man known for his Edwardian dress and fast cars. Always the gentleman's gentleman, the Third Doctor spent a great many years trapped on Earth in the 20th century due to the Time Lords punishing him for messing with history. To make up for the lack of space adventures, he often got into misadventures with his friends at UNIT, particularly the Brigadier. With his Venusian Aikido and alien gadgetry, this was the era that played out more like an extended James Bond movie. But the whole super spy thing can only go for so long, and eventually the writers gave the Doctor his TARDIS back, leading to one of my favorite favorite stories, The Curse of Peladon. While taking a test flight in the TARDIS, the Doctor and Jo Grant land on the planet Peladon. When they're mistaken for representatives from Earth, the Doctor finds himself involved in the committee of alien delegates assessing Peladon's petition to join the Galactic Federation, an organization made up of people of many different planets, similar to the Federation on Star Trek. When one of the King's advisors is killed, the High Priest fears the ancient curse of Agador is at work, but the Doctor suspects his old enemies, the Ice Warriors, who are part of the delegation, are to blame. Can the Doctor and Jo discover who the real enemy is before a diplomatic incident plunges everyone into war? Believe it or not, this serial, oddly enough, plays out like a live-action episode of Scooby-Doo, complete with a haunted house setup, secret passageways, a monster on the loose, and a bad guy hidden amongst the gathering, someone you'd least expect. The show's long been a champion of teaching tolerance and acceptance of other races and cultures, and this story is one of the stronger examples. In this case, it would have been so easy to cast the Ice Warriors as the villains, but not only do they break expectations, but the Doctor himself has to learn to put his disdain for his former enemies behind him when they turn out to be more than honorable. Even the actual monster lurking the castle turns out to be more than meets the eye. And Jo Grant's brief romance with the King is both touching as well as bittersweet when she unfortunately can't stay with him. Also, Alpha Centauri, the giant talking eyeball, is great for a chuckle or two. Bottom line, this is a great little whodunit mystery adventure with more than a few twists and turns, and characters who will teach you the age-old lesson of not judging a book by its cover. And now for the Doctor that practically needs no introduction, we come to Tom Baker, whose fourth Doctor was a cross between Sherlock Holmes and the Mad Hatter. With his crazy eye expressions, long scarf, and deep-seated resentment toward authority figures, 4 is infamous for being the longest-serving Doctor to date, and arguably the best-known of all his incarnations. So as you can imagine, it was tricky to narrow down my favorite to just one, as many of the more famous Who stories come from his era. But in the end, the serial that ultimately won me over was Genesis of the Daleks. The Doctor and his companions, Sarah Jane Smith and Harry, are summoned to the Daleks' home planet of Skaros before their rise to power. Hoping to prevent the dominating beings from developing their warlike behavior, the gang soon finds themselves in the middle of a war between the two races, the Khalids and the Thals, and uncover a plot by a Khalid scientist, Davros, to render his people invincible as the metal-encased Daleks. Will the TARDIS team be able to stop Davros? And given the chance, will the Doctor stoop to committing mass genocide and destroy his enemies before they're even born? There's a reason this serial is considered one of the greatest stories of the Doctor Who's long run. It not only fleshes out the backstory of the megalomaniac robot Daleks, but also presents a thoughtful storyline with elements that remain topical even today, like cultures locked in an endless war and genetic experimentation. Add to that the chilling villain and mad scientist Davros, who manipulates both his enemies and his own subordinates like a master chess player, stopping at nothing to take over the galaxy and letting nothing stand in his way. Physically, he even looks like a chess piece. 2 of the best moments of the show are contained in this story, the first being when the Doctor and Davros have a little chat about the fate of the universe and what they would do if they had the power to destroy everything. Davros' insane speech just builds and builds, and it's nothing short of memorable. The other comes when the Doctor is about to blow up the room where the Daleks are being created, and with the simple act of touching 2 wires together, he's left with an insanely difficult choice. If he kills the Daleks now, he'll be ridding the galaxy of a great evil forever. However, many planets put aside their differences and came together only because of the united threat of the Daleks. And even more importantly, for how evil the Daleks are, they are still an intelligent race, and taking this rare chance would mean committing mass genocide. Does he or anyone else have the right to do that? It's a heavy question with no clear answers. Bottom line, you need to give this serial a watch. It gives us a ton of backstory on the Doctor's deadliest, most famous enemies, while also giving an important commentary on the consequences of having to make life-changing decisions, one that would forever affect the Doctor, the eventual Time War, and all of history. According to the tradition definition of fair play. Determined to make the best of bad situations, his episodes played out more like a field trip gone horrifically wrong. He behaved a bit like an older brother to his companions, that or a frustrated team dad whenever things would inevitably go haywire. Kind of par for the course when he had up to 4 companions traveling with him at once. And ironically enough for this gentle and pacifist doctor, his stories tended to have high body counts. This is all the more evident in my personal favorite episode, Earthshock. Following an argument with Adric, who's tired of being teased and not taken seriously, the Doctor and company investigate the mysterious disappearance of an archaeological team, only to discover the Cybermen want to destroy Earth and will use any means at their disposal. Although the first team of androids are defeated, the Doctor traces their controllers to a freighter where a final battle commences, and although the TARDIS team saves the day, their victory comes at a very high cost. As I mentioned earlier, the Cybermen were always my favorite Who villains, even more so than the Daleks, and the Doctor's speech to them about the importance of emotions and being human is particularly memorable. The disappearing miners in Part 1 is effectively creepy, with the team slowly getting picked off one by one in a sequence that kind of reminds me of the movie Alien, and it all leads up to one of the saddest and most shocking endings in the run of the show when a longtime companion is killed off while saving the planet from total destruction. And while many of the Doctor's other friends would meet sad or bittersweet ends and send-offs, none were as raw, unflinching, and devastating as this one. Both memorable and gut-wrenching, this is one adventure that'll leave you stunned and reaching for the nearest tissue box. Going from a gentle, loving father figure to a prideful naysayer with a hidden heart of gold, the Sixth Doctor was a darker and more unstable Time Lord, more suited for a chaotic universe whose default emotion was smug self-satisfaction. With his unforgettable multicolored coat, this was one Doctor who wasn't afraid to resort to using his fists or outright killing to get out of a jam. As you could probably imagine, the fans weren't exactly hot on the idea of a periodically evil Doctor, and as such, his darker storylines led to him becoming one of the least favorite of the incarnations. But I don't think that's very fair on Colin Baker, who did the best he could with what he was given, and had he been given more time to shine, something truly outstanding could have come out of his run. Thankfully, the Big Finish audio plays are redeeming his character and giving Six the proper justice. But we're here to talk about the show, and while Six had some great moments here and there, there's one serial in particular that takes all of the best of his run and matches it together. And that story is Vengeance on Varos, in which the Doctor and his companion Perry are cruising along through the galaxy when the TARDIS stalls out and is floating loose in space. The nearest planet is Varos, which happens to be a source of the mineral needed to get the ship moving again. But Varos is plagued by a severe food shortage, and if any planet resident tries to rebel against the evil chief officer, that rebel is tortured on live TV broadcast into every resident's home. The TARDIS team must then navigate the hateful place that Varos is, get their hands on the precious minerals needed to reboot the ship, and help some of the planet's residents overthrow the evil chief officer. This episode can be downright disturbing at times, but it's very well done with its scary but creative torture traps, the Doctor's awesome one-liners, and this great side villain named Syl, who's this scheming literal slimeball that, despite being a greedy jerk, is fun to watch. What's also interesting is that while Varos is way ahead of the Earth in terms of technology, emotionally they haven't really evolved at all, getting kicks out of watching people suffer and blatantly voting off people they don't like with no regard for the consequences. It almost serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers and monotony of reality TV and how we as a society can become desensitized to horrific violence. With a lot of action and social commentary, this serial almost plays out like a precursor to the Hunger Games, and it's sad that Six wasn't given the proper justice. Had more of his episodes been like this one, he might have been piloting the TARDIS for a bit longer. Going from loud and pompous to manipulative and sneaky, Sylvester McCoy's Seventh Doctor was a lot quieter, friendlier, and modest, but could also be equally cold and pragmatic when it came to ensuring the greater good. A killer comedian, he dressed entirely in question marks, and his character pretty much was just that. While he began as a sort of bumbling goof, he became a more mysterious figure as time went on, to the point that it was hinted at more than once that he was more than just an average Time Lord. This is never more apparent than in my favorite story from his run, Remembrance of the Daleks. The Doctor arrives in 1960s London with his companion Ace, hoping to wrap up some unfinished business. The two then get caught in the crossfire of two Dalek factions who are engaged in a deadly search for the Hand of Omega, a piece of Time Lord technology that he himself left on Earth back as far as the series' first episode. Meanwhile, the Daleks are planning to perfect their own time travel capabilities in order to unleash themselves all across time and space. Can the Doctor and Ace stop their enemies from stealing the Gallifreyan secrets, or is the world doomed? This is pretty much a no-holds-barred fight between the Doctor and the Daleks, with a fast-paced story, a huge amount of action, better than the average special effects, and some very well-developed characters with some unexpected surprises. At long last, we finally get an explanation for what the Doctor was doing way back in the pilot episode, An Unearthly Child. And just when you think you know everything about the Doctor, along come a few plot twists that turn the series' continuity on its head. The bigger backstory of the Time Lords is fleshed out, and there's more than a few references to past episodes that longtime fans will catch. The episode even manages to give a bit of an origin story for the secret military agency that'll later be known as UNIT. But most of all, this serial manages to deliver a brilliant and unflinching allegory for the racist tensions at the time, with a group of white Daleks battling a team of black Daleks for domination. Two memorable scenes also include the Doctor mocking the Dalek leader's "I'm gonna take over the world" speech.
We shall become all
powerful, crush the lesser races, conquer the galaxy, unimaginable power, unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
Judge and me, Doctor.
And Ace beating up a Dalek with a baseball bat. As close to an action movie as the series got, this is definitely one of McCoy's best outings as the Doctor. Grab yourself a bat and go whack a Dalek.
Human female sighted on level 3.
Calling smoke!
Under attack! Under attack! Vision impaired!
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the 8th Doctor sadly only got a movie, so he's being left off the list for now. Maybe it's because 7 ate him? What? It's the best joke I got. Okay, let's get serious. We'll come back to him in a future video. So with that out of the way, we move on to... The brooding but sympathetic war veteran Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor was riddled with survivor guilt from his memories of the Time War. Prone to mood swings, this was a much more street-smart incarnation who could be very dark and moody at times, but still retained a great affection and empathy for others. Though he was the most normally dressed of all his incarnations, his one season was anything but, and despite his short run, there's no denying that if it wasn't for him, the series' modern relaunch wouldn't have become the international success it is today. As such, trying to pick just one episode from the season was very difficult, so almost all of them were arguably written to perfection. But after much deliberation, I finally had to go with The End of the World. The Doctor takes his new companion Rose 5 billion years into her future. Landing on a space station in orbit around Earth, they've arrived in time for a party celebrating the final destruction of Earth by the expansion of the Sun. But not everyone is as they appear, and pretty soon as money-grubbing schemes are exposed and sabotage is at work, it becomes a race against time to save everyone on the station from certain doom. Now, I know many of you will probably scratch your heads at this choice, and I'm fully aware that there's other episodes that are objectively better. If you want to see the absolute best of what 9 had to offer, watch Dalek or The Empty Child 2-parter. This is just my personal favorite for a few reasons. Even more so than the episode before it, this story was the first proper episode of New Who, as the fans call it. So this was the first time we saw a sample of what the updated series was going to be like and how Rose and the Doctor were going to work together. and to quote 9, they do a fantastic job. There are certain points where it seems like the Doctor purposely brought Rose to this point in time as a test to see if she could cut the mustard as a companion, and there's more than a few great moments with her adjusting to time traveling, such as her reaction to all the alien creatures and the conversation she has with her mom across the time stream. This is also the first time we see how the TARDIS translator works, the psychic paper, and a few characters that would come back in later seasons, such as Cassandra and the Face of Bo. But most of all, when 9 is reminded of the Time War, we see a sorrow and darkness in the Doctor that hadn't been seen before, so it became the basis for his new Who characterization. It's the first time we see the Doctor cry. The previous episode may have introduced Rose, but it's this episode that says who the Doctor is, especially when we're finally hit with the big shocker that Gallifrey was destroyed and he's the last of his kind. It's a story that's suspenseful and smart, thoughtful yet has plenty of action, and both funny yet bittersweet. A perfect way to reinvigorate an old series for a new generation. And now we come to my first Doctor, my favorite and the one who got me into the show to begin with. The scruffy heartthrob with an inner fury concealed under an easygoing attitude, David Tennant's 10th Doctor had a geek chic, bubbly personality who would unabashedly pepper in pop culture references while giving verbal beatdowns to the villains. But don't let his friendly attitude fool you. He never hesitated to lay down the law and subjected his foes to a fate worse than death if they passed up the one chance of redemption he always offered. While 9 may have kickstarted New Who, it was 10 who skyrocketed the series into the stratosphere, and he's arguably become one of the most popular incarnations of the Doctor of all time. With all that said, picking just one episode from 10's run was the most difficult out of this entire list, as there's a ton of stories you can make a reasonable argument for to have on your own list. There's the infamous Blink or Midnight, or the heartfelt school reunion, or the adventurous and fun Shakespeare Code. But after a lot of deliberation, my own personal favorite has to go to The Next Doctor. Landing the TARDIS on Christmas Eve 1851, 10 overhears a cry for help, and is shocked when he encounters a man calling himself the Doctor who has a companion, Rosita. Together, the two are on the trail of the Cybermen who they believe are responsible for a series of disappearances around London. But something just isn't quite right about this new Doctor, and it's up to 10 to solve the mystery. Is this really a future incarnation of himself, or is something much more sinister and tragic going on? Much like some of the other choices on this countdown, this is by no means the greatest episode ever, but it's one I personally love watching over and over. It has my favorite Who villains as the focus again, and with a giant robot battle at the end, how can you go wrong? The human villainess, on the other hand, is kinda one note. She's really just there to get the plot moving. But I can forgive it because the real meat of the story lies with the mystery surrounding the true identity of the Next Doctor. David Morrissey is so charming and perfect in the role, it really makes me wish that he did become the next incarnation. No offense to Matt Smith. While the mystery is semi-easy to figure out, I won't spoil too much here, but I think this episode is more cued to my ear because the plot delves more deeply into the human soul with both compassion and sensitivity. The real Doctor's not just saving a town from a giant monster, he's rescuing a man who's so internally damaged that he barricades himself in a fantasy in order to cope with a personal tragedy, something that 10 himself was guilty of in regards to coping with his role in the Time War. And in the end, the Next Doctor comes to discover his own inner strength and that it's better to be yourself than something you're not. Suspenseful, bittersweet, but ultimately triumphant, this episode continues to tug at my heartstrings and is one of the series' many Christmas specials that I like watching every year. And speaking of heartstrings, finally, at last, we come to the final Doctor on the list. The fairy tale wizard who could solve problems with his magic wand, Matt Smith's 11th Doctor was the old professor in a young man's body. You could always find him skipping all over the place despite the seriousness of the situation, and was especially fond of children, becoming a Santa-like figure to his companion Amy. But like his predecessor, scratch the surface and you'll find a secretive warrior who'll hold no qualms about unleashing his inner fury if you hurt him or his friends. Like 10, there were more than a few standout episodes during 11's run, and in trying to choose a favorite, it was between this or the Neil Gaiman penned episode, The Doctor's Wife. But in the end, the artist in me ultimately chose Vincent and the Doctor, a tear-jerking story in which Eleven notices an ominous figure in one of Vincent van Gogh's paintings, prompting him and Amy to travel back and meet the famous painter. There they discover that Province is being terrorized by an invisible monster known as the Cryphacus, a creature that only Vincent can see, earning him the town's ridicule and mockery. It then falls on our odd trio to capture and defeat the creature. But as they're about to find out, not all of time can be rewritten, and there's some evils just out of the Doctor's reach. If the pick for 10 made you reach for the tissues, then this one will make you use the entire box. Van Gogh has always been an interesting but tragic figure, and making an entire episode revolving around his depression was no easy task. And I fully admit the episode isn't perfect. The monster itself isn't particularly memorable, and how only Vincent can see it is left pretty open-ended and up for interpretation. But the stuff that's good is really good, mainly the part of the plot that dives into what drives Van Gogh to be an artist and his frustration at not being appreciated or taken seriously. As a writer and artist myself, I think I can safely speak for all creators of art that we've been in that situation at some point or another, where we just want someone to like our work and feel validated. More than that, Vincent just wants people to see things the way he does and understand them better, and the way they weave in his famous art pieces into the real-world environments is clever. But most of all, this is one of the few episodes where I legit shed a tear by the end. The Doctor and Amy get the bright idea of taking Vincent into the future with them and showing him how famous he ultimately became. His stunned reaction is too remarkable for words. But the ultimate tragedy is that in the end, their efforts to inspire him are mostly in vain. While sad, it's still better to show the truth that sometimes inner demons do win, and that all that's left are the paintings. This leads into arguably one of the best, most relatable quotes of the series run, and in a weird way pretty much describes the show as a whole.
The way I see it, every life is a pile of good things and bad things. Hey, the good things don't always soften the bad things, but vice versa. The bad things don't necessarily spoil the good things or make them unimportant. And we definitely added to his pile of good things.
And there you have it, my favorite episodes of Doctor Who. But stick around, because coming soon I'll have a follow-up video discussing the 8th and 12th Doctors, the specials, the movie, and the spin-off shows. I'm Cartoon12, and I hope you enjoyed the countdown, or up in this case. I'll have more top 10 lists soon, and I'll see you all next time.